So let's talk a little bit about L-glutamine. I think L-glutamine is probably the most commonly recommended gut health supplement. So let's talk a little bit about how it works, and why in some people it's actually contraindicated. L-glutamine is considered a conditionally essential amino acid. What this means is that it's a non-essential amino acid, meaning the body can actually create glutamine. But in certain situations, the body can't actually make enough glutamine to support all of the metabolic functions. And in this scenario, glutamine becomes essential, meaning that we need to get it from our diet. And the reason that glutamine is promoted for gut health is because glutamine has a few very specific roles in the cells that line our gastrointestinal tract called endothelial cells. Glutamine can actually activate what are called cell proliferation. Glutamine is actually very anabolic for our endothelial cells. What I mean is that it promotes protein synthesis and cellular growth and division. And the result of glutamine inside of our intestinal cells are an increase in the production of what are called tight junction proteins. And these are proteins that actually hold these cells together. And the role of these proteins is to decrease the permeability of our intestinal tract. You see, between the intestinal cells, food molecules can actually pass into our bloodstream from our intestinal tract. And the tighter these junctions are, the less molecules can actually pass into our bloodstream. And the much smaller these molecules need to be, meaning they need to be much more digested. And when large molecules that are undigested get into our bloodstream, they are treated the exact same way as a virus, and we mount an immune response to these undigested food particles, giving us symptoms of a food allergy. The more of these tight junction proteins that we have, the less permeable our intestinal tract is, meaning the less symptoms of food allergies we will manifest. And this is actually how a lot of the common allergens cause food allergies, because they break down these tight junction proteins, and when they're outside of the gastrointestinal tract, they're viewed as foreign pathogens. And you'll get the same response as you would if you got the cold or flu. So in this way, L-glutamine aids in reducing allergenic responses to foods. Another thing that it does is increase what is called cell proliferation. So the intestinal cells have a very high turnover rate, meaning the rate at which old cells are replaced with new cells. And L-glutamine actually increases this turnover rate. So it will actually create much more new healthy intestinal cells that are stronger and much more capable of aiding in proper digestion and absorption. So in this way, L-glutamine can enhance digestion, absorption, and gut health, or for a better word, intestinal integrity. And finally, glutamine can actually be used very similar to glucose as an energy source. It actually enters into the exact same cycle as glucose. So in this way, glutamine can actually be used as energy for all of the aforementioned cellular processes. And the reason why this is so pronounced in intestinal cells is because they are the first cells exposed to glutamine, and these cells rapidly absorb and utilize this glutamine, which does mean that there will be less glutamine inside of our bloodstream, so the most pronounced effects of glutamine are going to be on our intestinal tract. However, let's talk what happens when glutamine does get into our bloodstream. It can be used inside of the brain to create different neurotransmitters, but a little bit more important, and specifically I want to focus on, is its effects on both cancer cells and immune cells. Again, glutamine can be used to activate cellular proliferation and used as an energy source in both of these cells. And this will increase the capacity and functionality of our immune system. And for most people, this aids in fighting off any sort of cold, flu, or virus. And having a strong immune system is oftentimes an extremely beneficial thing. But in some cases, we can develop an overactive immune system. And our immune system can actually start attacking our healthy cells. And this is referred to as an autoimmune disease. So when we ingest so much glutamine that it ends up inside of our bloodstream, which we'll typically only be able to achieve from supplementation, could potentially exacerbate symptoms of any sort of autoimmune disease. But in someone who doesn't have an autoimmune disease, could actually increase the functionality of their immune system and could be of benefit. And the other scenario where glutamine would be contraindicated would be in someone who has cancer, specifically any sort of intestinal cancer. Cancer cells can, yes, use glutamine as a fuel source and use glutamine for cellular proliferation. And the thing that denotes a cancer is rapid cellular proliferation. So glutamine would actually increase cancer's ability to multiply and increase the mass of any sort of tumor. And now it certainly does depend on the type of cancer. And some cancers will not use glutamine as a fuel source. But some cancers actually rely on glutamine very heavily. And this is why when someone says cancer, they should often delineate between what type of cancer they're talking about. Because cancer is just a blanket term for rapidly dividing cells. But the reason these cells could be dividing are for multiple different reasons, and how these cells are dividing could also be due to multiple different factors, which is why a ketogenic diet could be helpful or harmful for some different cancers. But I will assure you that an alkaline diet is probably useless for most cancers. And specifically, I mentioned gastrointestinal cancer such as colon cancer. And the reason for this is, once again, these cells will rapidly uptake glutamine. So glutamine supplementation would have the most pronounced effects on this type of cancer. And again, this is why in so many of my videos I say that supplementation and even dietary patterns is so individual that we shouldn't really be making blanket statements about what is good and what is bad, what is helpful and what is harmful. There are certain things that are almost unanimously helpful or harmful. For most people, glutamine supplementation or just a glutamine-rich diet can assist in gastrointestinal health and the strength and integrity of their digestive system. But for others, such as individuals with some sort of cancer or autoimmune disease, may actually need to limit foods that are high in glutamine or foods high in other amino acids that can be turned into glutamine, like glutamate. So foods high in glutamine are really just any sort of meat product. These include things like beef, chicken, lamb, pork, ham, and eggs. And the same goes for glutamate, except high levels of glutamate are also found in fermented foods due to the fermentation process itself. And interestingly, it's also fairly high in things like seaweed and other sea vegetables. So that being said, I hope this helped and kind of broke down glutamine in a digestible fashion and gave you a little bit more insight as to why I oftentimes recommend people to meet with a coach before they go about supplementing. And if you would like help with your supplementation or dietary strategies,